Welcome to Keep Me Posted with Planet Aid. And we are talking today to Chiara D'Amore from Community Ecology Institute. And this is very exciting because you're doing some really great things over at CEI. Tell us a little bit about the organization and some of the things that you're doing right now.
Thank you very much, Monica. So the Community Ecology Institute is a Howard County, Maryland-based nonprofit organization, and it's our mission to cultivate communities where people and nature thrive together. So we really emphasize getting people outside, off their screens, out their doors, into nearby nature. Um, we do that in a variety of ways. What has become really incredible in the last 3 years is that we are now the stewards of the last working farm in our hometown of Columbia. And so now we're able to invite community members out to that particular property for a wide range of programming. Whereas prior to becoming the stewards of Freetown Farm, we were always running programs from other people's properties, which had neat opportunities available to it, but also a lot of limitations. So now that we are based on a farm, a lot of our programming does center around food access, equity, teaching people how to grow their own food, working with community partners to bring local farm fresh food to those in need and who might not otherwise have access. Um, but we started out as an environmentally focused organization. The nonprofit emerged out of my doctoral research in sustainability education and my career as an environmental consultant. And so we originated with this environmental lens, but now we really see our work being at the intersections of environment, education, equity, and health. And there's so many really beautiful ways that that comes together within our community and in our work.
One of the wonderful things that I saw when I was reading a little bit about this is I felt your passion about this. There's I guess a lot of different things, but one of the things that I noticed was turning lawns into gardens.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that and why is that so important? Because most people would think, well, it's green, so isn't this environmentally good? We kept the grass, so inform
I
us a
have a
little bit
lot to
about
say
that.
about that. I
Yeah.
can try to be succinct. It's actually really exciting. So one of our newest programs is called Nourishing Gardens, and
Hmm.
the whole mission of Nourishing Gardens is really trifold. Um, from a ecological perspective, we are trying to transform lawns into ecologically beneficial food growing spaces. So that's like the big thing that you can see on the ground. But the program also has a green collar workforce training element. We run fairly in-depth trainings at least once a year. So far, they've been once a year. The program just originated in 2021, where we bring cohorts of people together to learn how to imagine an alternative to the lawn. How might you um, site and design and install and maintain and harvest from a nourishing garden? And so there's that workforce development part, and then there's really the community education around thinking about an alternative to the status quo as the lawn as the default of what you would see outside the door of a home or a business or a school.
What
So
would be some of those objections, though? Why would somebody be objectionable to that?
a lot of reasons. So the lawn is really a status quo. It's actually a colonial era status symbol.
Mhm.
In colonial Europe back, 1600s and earlier, but really around the era, there began to be landholders that had enough land and access to labor and just real privilege that they could have huge expanses of greenery that were producing nothing. So
Mhm.
it actually came over to America with, colonial um, with the colonial era to have
Mhm.
the lawn as a status symbol. And so it's sort of this antiquated icon of privilege to have a lawn, but it's
Mhm.
become our default, it's become our norm. And it's kind of been indoctrinated into homeowners associations. And it's really sort of the easiest thing to do. You spread some grass seed and you mow it down to an inch and rinse and repeat. But lawns are ecological dead zones. First time I
Mhm.
heard that, I felt like it was a really extreme statement and I had to sort of chew on it a little bit. But they actually harbor no biodiversity. So if you think about the decline of the lightning bug or the firefly, it's a large part due to lawns as opposed to alternatives.
Oh.
If you think about the overall decline of pollinators, bumblebees and honeybees and the like, It's because we are having these huge expanses of monoculture. So it's when you put one crop in, which is what we do with lawns, that have none of the plant species that are needed to have a healthy ecosystem. So they don't support life of any kind. They're kind of intentionally not, like, no dandelions, no clover, no bugs, like get it all out of there. It should be kind of like a green carpet, right? But the resources that go into maintaining lawns are actually incredible. It's the #1 irrigated crop in America. If you aggregate all the different lawns and think about the amount of water is required to keep them pristine and green, it's more than any other crop in our
And like you
country.
said, it
And it
yields
produces healthy.
nothing.
Right.
Right.
And yields nothing, right? Other than this kind of antiquated aesthetic. So from a water perspective, from a fertilizer perspective, from a gas power required to mow it perspective, from just a labor perspective, statistics on what it takes to maintain that status quo of a pure green grass lawn, it's pretty mind-blowing in terms of the ecological damage it does. And then there's no ecological good that comes out of it. So we are looking to even encourage people to take the periphery, make it a little bit smaller. There's nothing wrong with a green space for your pet or your children to play, or just have a lawn chair, but it could be many things other than a monocrop grass. It could be thyme, it could be clover, a lot of things that used to be kind of having that position of creating that green expanse that are more beneficial. So we're encouraging people to rethink the lawn. Some protests to it are people really are concerned about wildlife, which is interesting. There's kind of not a desire to share our outdoor spaces with bees or snakes or anything that might come into a space that is more alive. People sort of don't want their outdoor spaces to be alive in many situations. There's kind of a concern or an anxiety around there being life in those spaces out to your front or back door. So when we talk about schools, sometimes the schools are concerned about liability if you're attracting pollinators, maybe a child might get stung. So there are a lot of sort of thought barriers to it. A lot of homeowners associations up until recently did have prohibitions around what you could put in your front yard. Like you couldn't have your lawn be more than 2 inches, 90% of your yard had to be lawn, not allowed to plant a whole variety of native plants. That's actually changed in Maryland. There was a law passed last year that prohibits homeowners associations from prohibiting a lot of conservation landscapes. But it's going to take a lot of work to change the mindset. And then it's like, how do I do that? How do I create something that's beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, that is done in a way that's healthy for the environment and that provides health benefits in the way of some food or some herbs to people. So there's a lot there. But the program is really exciting. We've been focusing on installing gardens at schools and in public spaces this year to try to start changing the dialogue and the exposure to